Oxford and Cambridge. Between the 14th and the 19th centuries, more than 100 universities were founded or re-established on the European continent. In England, however, only two universities, Oxford and Cambridge, existed until the 1820s. This was because of the Stamford Oath, enacted in 1334 by King Edward III, which made all graduates of Oxford and Cambridge swear they would not pass on the knowledge they had acquired to students outside of the two existing institutions. The oath was mandatory and strictly enforced. In 1686, for example, Oxford graduate Charles Morton faced criminal charges for establishing an independent academy in London. After repeated arrests, he eventually immigrated to North America, where he became president of Harvard College. The Stamford Oath allowed Oxford and Cambridge to maintain a monopoly over higher education in England for centuries. To enforce the oath, they needed the support of the government, which was closely tied to the nation's religious establishment. Both the government and the country's official church happily cooperated, as the monopoly allowed them to quickly and efficiently identify and put an end to movements that threatened their authority. The 14th century Lollard movement that emerged among intellectuals at Oxford, for example, criticized things such as the tax-exempt status of the church and called for reforms. In response, the government and the church united to suppress the protesters until the movement was driven underground. Furthermore, at Cambridge in 1570, students rebelled against laws put in place by Queen Elizabeth I, which forced the university to ban ideas that went against the church's teachings. 3 students involved in this rebellion were the early leaders of the Puritan religious movement, and they faced persecution by English authorities until they immigrated to North America. In the early 19th century, the government and church underwent a period of crisis that damaged their cooperation and authority. Taking advantage of this, intellectuals began questioning the unique status of Oxford and Cambridge, and in 1827 succeeded in their efforts to end the Stamford Oath. Around that same time, London University began enrolling students. A radical experiment, the school was established with neither funding nor consent from the government or the church, and it was made clear that religious faith was not an admission requirement. Though this led both the government and the church to speak out against the new institution's establishment, they were unwilling or unable to involve themselves in actively attempting to close down the new university. By the end of the 19th century, instead of opposing new English institutions, Oxford and Cambridge had become involved in creating them. For instance, Benjamin Jowett, an Oxford teacher, was a strong advocate for founding a new university in Bristol, and funds were raised at Oxford for this purpose. Jowett's support for Bristol was part of a plan whereby Oxford would broaden its reach through the establishment of new institutions. These would loyally educate students in line with Oxford's principles, and their most capable graduates would be brought to Oxford. As it turned out, however, the new universities remained wholly independent, eventually lessening the long-standing influence of Oxford and Cambridge in English public life.